Hey guys, Jay here. All right, we're gonna continue our enemy setup. So in this video, guys, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in the patrol state to life. So by now, you should have a enemy setup. You have animation set up for the enemy for idle and movement. You should have patrol points laid out. You should have a navigation mesh. You should have a nav mesh agent set up. If you followed everything to a T, you should have all of those set up by now, guys. So in this video, I'm going to assume that you've done those steps and we're going to move forward. We're going to create our enemy AI script, which is going to basically, what we're going to first do is we're going to allow it to basically walk between these patrol states, patrol points, go to these patrol points, wait a few seconds, and then go on to the next one, wait a few seconds, go on to the next one, wait a few seconds. So it'll keep looping this so that the player can sort of understand the pattern of the enemy. And then as soon as the enemy sees the player in the next video, it's going to start attacking, chase and attack the player. That's a separate video. So in this video, it's only the patrol states, guys. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is go to the scripts folder, right click, create C# script. I'm going to call it enemy AI. All right, exciting stuff. Let's open that up in Visual Studio. All right, so open that up here. So I've got the code here for you just to save time, but I'm going to explain everything. Don't worry. So as you guys may know, that's just to save time in this course. So I'm going to walk through it though. Don't worry. So here we go. What we're going to do now is actually, hold on. Let me just create one more thing before I get started. Then I'm also gonna have a collider. All right, we're not done yet. All right, there we go. All right, let's get started with this script. Guys, I'm gonna walk through from the top and I'm gonna explain everything. And then the script for this is included down below. You guys can download it and then try to keep up with the explanation so that you understand what I'm trying to explain here, so that you understand what you're coding, right? So let's go through this from the top. So in the beginning here, we've got a nav mesh agent, right? Public nav mesh agent. You know what that is. That is basically the cylinder that came around the player, which allows the player to move to different locations. It's a component that we're going to drag and drop in Unity, right? We got a reference for that. Second thing we have is an array, guys. So as you may be familiar, there's the notation for arrays. So we got a transform array of patrol points. So we're going to drag in all those 4 patrol points into this array in Unity so we can define a list, right? A list that they can sort of pick a point from and then go to the next point and keep going, right? Next thing we have is a layer mask. You already know what that is. Layer mask, we have what is ground and what is play so that it can differentiate what's exactly ground and what's play. And then we have a health, we have is dead. We just added this for the future. We're going to start setting it up slowly. Then we got patrolling. We got a walk point, which is basically the point that you're going to walk to. The walk point set bool is basically for the enemy to know that there's a walk point already set and you're going there. All right. Then attacking, you got some parameters here. Time between attacks, already attacked, then projectile. Projectile is basically the bullet or whatever that's going to the player, right? And then other than that, we've got a states here for sight range, attack range. That's basically how far it sees, how far it has to be to attack. And then player in range, player in attack range basically defines if the player is inside, which means detection area, it can see the player, or plays in attack range, plays close enough for an attack, right? So the enemy can attack. So these are things we've set up for the upcoming scripts as well, upcoming videos as well. All right. And then we've got an animator, obviously. We've got that already set up. And then we've got a raycast hit that basically detects if, the eyesight is seeing the player. And then we've got a patrol state parameters over here. Patrol point index basically defines out of that array of patrol points, which index we're currently in. Is it the first one, second one, third one, or the fourth one? We keep track of that. So you know exactly which point to go to next. And then we have a wait at patrol time, which is basically how long the enemy is going to stay at one patrol point before moving on to the next one. Like I said earlier, it's going to walk to a patrol point, stay for a little bit, and then go on to the next one. So that time can be controlled from this parameter. And then we got an is waiting flag, is waiting boolean, which basically defines if a enemy is waiting there or not. Right? That's basically how we can differentiate that. And then a couple of states here. So if you follow the enum lesson, guys, by now in the scripting module up there, you should know that this is how you define different states, right? So these allow us to sort of differentiate and easily tag certain behaviors in our AI or any other script in our game. So we have a patrol and a combat state only. So we're going to keep it simple in this course, but this should give you more than enough knowledge to build different other states as well. You can bring in a investigation state where it's just looking for the last known location of the player, or you can have different other states where it's maybe taking a nap state if you want it to just sit down and take a nap. I don't know. It's up to you. So we've got patrol and combat in the awake, right? So it's like you know already. So awake is getting called before start. It allows us to set up certain things in the script before we begin the game, right? So as soon as the script awakes, we basically look for the player from our game using the find game object with tag component, which you may be familiar by now if you follow the scripting lessons. And then you've got agent. We get that component from our own game object. We get the collider from our game object. We get the animator from game object, so that you don't have to drag and drop it. It just finds those components from within the game object you're currently in, which is the enemy, right? And then obviously you start off by setting the first patrol point in our array as the agent's destination. Now, this is how you command the navmesh agent to go somewhere. It's by using agent.destination equals some position in your game. In this case, we only have 4 points, 4 possible points that the enemy can go to. Patrol point 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you start off the game, we're going to tell it to go to the first position in that array, right? Which basically allows this script to kick off by going to the first state. All right, if you keep going forward now, in the update, we check if the enemy is dead. If it's dead, we don't do anything, return. All right, we don't execute any other code moving forward because enemy is dead, there's no point in executing. But if the enemy is alive, which is the rest of the code, we first check if the player is in sight. Now, how do we do that, guys? In Unity, there is a function known as checkSphere, physics.checkSphere. What that does is, guys, keep in mind that it's sort of an invisible sphere that goes around the player. So the first parameter is transform the position, which is the origin point of the sphere. Where should it originate from? It's originating from the enemy itself. So that's why it says transform the position, referring to itself. Comma, sight range. Now, how far ahead that it sees, right? That's a float variable that's defined up here, right? And then what is player? That is basically the layer mask that basically differentiates who the player is and what the player is not. There could be multiple characters, but only one can be the player, right? Most of the time, unless it's multiplayer. So in that case, using layers, this sphere can differentiate exactly who's a player. And if any of these parameters catch the player within that zone, player in sight range becomes true because it's a Boolean, right? That makes sense. The same thing applied for the attack range. That's going to be another invisible sphere, basically a smaller sphere, where if you're within the attack range, it starts attacking. Until then, it starts chasing and tries to close that gap between the player and the enemy, right? So it sees the player, but it's far away, so it just moves towards the player. Then when it's within the attack range, it goes into a combat state or attack state. All right, that being said, if the player is not in sight or not in attack range, you go into patrolling, right? Which is basically the default state. So if player you can't see the player, it is not in attack range, meaning it's just going to do its thing, which is the normal patrolling, right? Which is what we're going to set up in this lesson. So here are the animations for that. We just simply check for the velocity of the agent. That's the simplest way to do this. So if the agent is moving somewhere, velocity will not be 0, right? It will not be 0 because it's moving somewhere. So there's going to be a velocity to it, right? And current state is not equal to combat, right? Meaning we're not in combat state, we are simply in patrol state, and the enemy is not moving. We basically do animator.setBool isIdle true, which is basically the normal way of giving a Boolean to your animator, which we've done so many times at this point. Else, if the velocity is not 0, meaning the agent is moving somewhere and current state is still not equal to combat, still not in combat, you set isIdle false, meaning it'll go from idle state. If you remember the animator, it'll go from idle state to a walking state, and when it's not moving again, it'll go back to idle state, and it'll keep repeating while it just moves between these 4 patrol points. Very straightforward at this point, guys. If you have any questions, though, throw it at me in the community chat or the community itself. We'll respond, we'll help you out. All right. So in the patrol method, guys, what we're going to do here is basically, we're calling that over there, by the way. What we're doing is if a walk point is not set and it's not waiting, we search for a walk, meaning it's currently not doing anything. It's not looking, it's at its destination. It needs another walk point. What we do is we call a method called search walk point, where we simply do, we get the current patrol point, and then we simply get the next one. All right, we just increment the next walk point over here. When it goes to a walk point, then we get that walk point here, and then we say walk point has been set. It's all good. All right, meaning it can basically now go to that walk point over here, and then we set that destination as the next walk point. It moves over there, and then basically we calculate the distance to that, and then we check if the walk point has been reached. Now, how do we detect that the walk point has been reached? We simply do this condition. We just check this magnitude, which is basically the distance there, the amount, basically the distance to your destination. So when it reaches that destination, the magnitude is going to be less than 1. It's going to be very close. And then it's going to basically wait at that walk point, which is basically what this coroutine does. So it waits here, waits for a patrol, given amount of patrol wait time, which is defined over here as 3 seconds. You can always update that. And then it goes on to the next patrol point, and it increments by 1, which means in the array, it was at the 0 position. It increments by 1, 2, 3, and then it goes back to 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And then search for walk point, so on and so forth. Very straightforward script, I think. Feel free to ask any questions. That being said, guys, we also have a draw gizmos here, right? The reason is we kind of want to know the site sphere. We want to see that, how big it is, and then sort of the attack range as well within the developer scene. So we don't have to have this, but if you have this, it's going to be very easy for you to see how further ahead that it sees, and kind of gives you an idea. You'll see what I mean when I hit save here, go back to Unity. Awesome. So with that, guys, I'm going to select the enemy here. All right, and I'm going to attach our new script here using add component. I'm going to search for enemy AI. All right. With that, guys, we need to drag in our nav mesh agent to this slot here. All right. Then we need some patrol points. We have 0 here. So add 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's the first patrol point? I kind of want this to be the first patrol point. All right, this one here. So I'm going to drag that in, and the next one should be this, guys. It's kind of not in order, which I don't really like. So I'm going to rename this as patrol point A. And then what's the next one? This one. So patrol point B, patrol point C, patrol point D. All right, I'm just going to change the order as well, just for sanity. So A, B, C, D. Awesome, it's in order. So let's go to your enemy. So if you go to this here, so the first patrol point should be A. I'm going to drag and drop these here. B, C, D. Awesome. All right. That being said, now we just got to set these things. So what is ground? Select ground here. We already should have this by this point. We already did that in the player setup. What is player? We need a player layer as well, so which we haven't done actually. We're going to go ahead and do that. Go to add layer here. We're going to create a new layer called player. And then simply click on your player here. Make sure the layer is selected to player. And then if it asks you this message, do you want to set layer player for all of its child objects, because it has a bunch of child objects inside of it, just simply say no, this object only. Basically this one, and none of these guys will get that same layer because the parent has it. That's enough for it. So click the enemy again, go back here. So what is player? Player. Now we should have a new layer. Awesome. That being said, what's the health? I'll give it a health of 50 maybe. So your bullet should deal maybe 10 damage. So you gotta kind of hit it 5 times to kill it. So that's good. Time between attacks. I've figured out the good values for this. So let me just open that file up and give you the perfect values for this. Second here. So I figured out that the time between attacks should be 1 if it's a good amount. And then projectile can be the enemy bullet, but let's not worry about it right now. We haven't set up the attack. We'll do it in the next video. Sight range, I've seen that 20 works really well for the sight. That And when you do that, you'll notice there's a little sphere around it. Do you see that? That's pretty cool, right? So I can actually adjust it like this. So this is how far ahead that it sees, guys. This is that gizmo that we drew, right? So 20 means that this is how far it's going to see. So if I actually increase that to maybe 30, as you can see, when the player enters this area, the enemy can actually already see, which is good. I think I got to keep it around that point because you kind of want the enemy to detect you when the player enters this region and start attacking you, right? If you don't want that, you can also reduce that a little bit, and so that the player has to go around here to basically get detected. For the attack, guys, I think 20 would be good. So when you do that, you should see another sphere show up here, right? This is the attack sphere, right? So ideally, attack sphere should be less than your side sphere because obviously it doesn't make sense. You gotta sort of detect first before you attack, right? You can have it bigger, which basically means that if you increase that more than your sight range, what it means is after it gets detected, you can just stand over here and start attacking because player can be over here and it'll start shooting, and that kind of doesn't make sense because the enemy is too far away. You kind of want the enemy to come towards you. That makes that much more exciting, right? It makes it more harder because enemies are now coming towards you and fighting you. So you kind of want them to close that gap. So I'm going to reduce that to essentially somewhere around 20, so that it'll assume the players over here. It'll basically stay around this much as the distance between them, and then start shooting. So that is pretty good. Wait time is 3. That's fine. Patrol is fine. Yep. Now let's test it out. So if I run this now, it kind of got stuck. It's still not moving. Oh, actually, wait, hold on. Did I miss anything? Let me see. There's a null pointer crash here. Let's see what that is. Oh yeah, it couldn't find player. Why is that? We didn't have a tag set for the player. So it's looking for a tag called player, meaning your player should be tagged. So if I click player, oh yeah, it's untagged. So make sure that it's tagged as player. If you don't have a tag called player, guys, add tag, create a new tag here. But by default, I believe Unity gives you a tag called player. So tag it. That's done. There we go. So NPC should now move to its destination. Wait for a couple of seconds there. Idle states are now kicking off really well. It's going off to the next place. That's pretty good. I feel like compared to the animation, guys, the speed is a bit too much. As you can see, it's kind of weird, right? It just doesn't match up. So I'm going to reduce the speed a little bit to maybe 2.8. See what it looks like. That makes a bit more sense. All right, let's play this in maximize mode and see what it looks like. Awesome, look at that, pretty good. Now it's not going to detect you right now because obviously we don't have the combat state set up, so it's not going to do that. But right now, it's doing its thing. It's pretty good. So it has already detected you. That's why it stopped moving, right? It has detected you, and it's supposed to now chase you, but we don't have the script for it. But if it doesn't detect you, it's going to do its thing. I'm going to stay over here not to get detected, and it's just going to move between its point like that. But as soon as you come into this range, basically it now sees the player, and then basically you can engage in combat. So we can do that in the next session, guys. This is basically the enemy setup and AI patrol states. Yeah, that's about it. I'll see you guys in the next video where we're going to set up the combat state.